You're watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa, and I'm chatting to Brett Dawson, former CEO of Dimension Data. Brett, let's look back at your journey with what was once the biggest IT company in South Africa. Certainly, if you look back 18 years when you started with OmniLink, a small startup within the Dimension Data fold. Let's talk about that. And then fast track your journey to the CEO position.
Well, certainly. I joined the group in the late 1990s into their first pure services play. So before that, Dimension Data was very much in the hardware, the technology, but resale.
A box dropper.
Well,
the terminology that we wanted to get away from.
Value-added reseller. But I came in with a small team to try and build the commercial model and how do we build the services offerings to take a pure services play to market. And that was called the virtual private network in those days. And it was the first time Dimension Data had to invest in infrastructure and in building a solution and not just reselling somebody else's technology. So it was about 18 years ago. We were referred to as the SIV in those days because we had to.
You were losing money at a rate of knots?
That was the plan. We had to invest all the technology up front, pretty much like a service provider. You had to invest, and then as you built the scale, as you got the clients on board, then the profitability came through very fast, and luckily we were very successful there.
So there are a lot of people out there watching this interview right now and saying, wow, you started your corporate career with an entity and in a startup position within the broader company, and you worked your way up to CEO.
Right.
What is the lesson to climbing the corporate ladder as you did?
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons, but the interesting one was a story I once heard from Alan Kaywood, who was a previous CEO, and it came to me as a bit of a surprise. He said that the reason he thought I got ahead fast was I did the difficult things. I put up my hand, I took the really difficult jobs and took them with a passion and a vigor and just made it happen. And I think that was probably what got me ahead quicker than one would have expected, I suppose.
And your background as a chartered accountant, did that contribute to your success?
Well, I think it's a great qualification. When I first did it many years ago, I always thought it was never to become an accountant. But I always thought that would be just a fantastic platform on which to then go into industry and into just general business. So I would do it again if I had the choice.
In its heyday, Dimension Data was a boys' club, and it was known as such by the media and the broader business environment. So not only did you play the corporate game very effectively, but you did it into a very, very tight boys' club. Is there anything that you can shed in terms of breaking through the management clique, which was very united as the team that had basically put that company together?
Well, Bronwyn, I think why I was chosen at that stage was really to make to be able to come in as an outsider, if you like, as a new broom, and really make the tough choices. Because Jeremy had a team there that had been around forever, had driven the business.
And of course, we're talking about Jeremy
Ord, the chairman. Had taken it to a certain position, darling of the stock exchange, but then we had the massive crash in the dot-com
So the dot-com bubble burst.
And then with that, Dimension Data went into tough financial times, and I was really brought in right at that time to be able to make the really tough choices that were necessary.
So how do you make those tough choices? Because that can't weigh on anybody very easily.
No, they're tough.
We're talking about cutting staff, effectively.
Well, the first thing I had to do was drive a turnaround plan. It was a very aggressive, 90-day turnaround plan, because Dimension Data at that stage was losing $4 million a month. So we were running out of cash very quickly. So I had to come in and put in a very aggressive turnaround plan, part of which was, first, the more interesting bit, I think, was to grow, to find the areas where we would grow. But yes, we had to exit dozens of businesses, and we had to cut our staff, and that's really weighs on you. That's really really tough stuff. But we had to do that in order so that the core business could survive. And frankly, once we had made those tough calls and decided what was going to be our core business and where we'd expand from that core, then the business started turning around really fast.
How did you manage to navigate through that period personally? Again, it comes down to the cutting of staff, to the impacting of families. And I'm asking you because there are a lot of people out there in the current environment who are having to make very tough decisions, similar decisions to those that you made at that time.
Of course, businesses will always go through cycles. Even the best businesses go through the ups and downs. And there are times when you have to refocus and potentially reduce people. And I think companies need to do that on an ongoing basis. It's really tough. I haven't found an easy way to do it. For me, those are always the toughest decisions because you're affecting good people, and they might, in most cases, they haven't done anything wrong, or they haven't performed. They might just be in a part of the business which no longer
wrong place, wrong time,
is not performing, wrong place. And so those are really the toughest decisions, and there's no easy way. There's sleepless nights. It's tough, but you have to make those calls, and you need to make those calls to reinvigorate the part of the business that you believe can really accelerate in.
So you talk about a 90-day turnaround plan.
Yeah.
You achieved that.
Right. Well, there was initially 90, and then it extended. So we had, because it took us up to about maybe 12 months before all the measures were starting to move in the right direction. But yeah.
Some bad capital allocation decisions had been made prior to your taking on the CEO position, Proxicom being one of those. Did you feel that you were cleaning up bad decisions?
Well, I think that's tough to say. I think there were, it's just different times, and the whole macroeconomic environment had changed with the dot-com burst. So it was just a different, the world had changed and changed dramatically. Post the 9/11, and a lot of our companies, their business models simply evaporated. The Proxicom business model just didn't exist. So the toughest decision I had to make, but right out of the blocks, didn't take long, took it kind of in a day, was to exit that acquisition of Proxicom, which we had invested, I think a total investment of about $500 million. So I wasn't popular with the board when I said that was my first decision.
Now, the executive chairman, as we've mentioned, Jeremy Ord, has attributed you with growing that company to the turnover status of $8 billion on an annual basis. He also attributes you with the globalization of the organization and the very successful transaction with NTT.
Right.
Talk me through that phase. Now you're out of the hard yards, and you are aiming for growth. So you aim for this $8 billion turnover.
So initially, the first phase was that turnaround, or I was, I'd like to be, talk, very frankly, to say stop the bleeding. And the next phase for me was profitable growth. In that phase, once we'd stabilized, once the numbers were looking much better, we then started driving. It was time to be ambitious, time to be bold. And we thought that the market would, whatever the market growth was for our industry, we set ourselves an objective of growing 3 times the market. So that's the number, guys. Let's go try and grow this business at 3 times the market growth rate. And we came up with a plan on how to do that. So we drove, and consistently then for that whole period until the entity acquisition, which must have been about 60 years or so, we were able to achieve about a 14% growth rate in dollars in an industry probably growing at about 4.5. So how did we do that?
You more than achieved the target that you had set yourself.
For that initial phase. So the $8 billion has taken us, beyond the entity acquisition. So just in the first 5 years of profit growth before entity acquisition, we grew at about 14% compound growth over 5 years. And that was just terrific growth by focusing on a few market segments that we thought would grow. So we said we're tiny in security. We're $30 million in security. We're probably, looking back, it's hard to believe we were that small. 30, and we took that to 900. We were $91 million in unified communications, in telephony and video, all those things.
So convergence.
Convergence. And we've taken that to 1.4 billion from 90. So we chose some really strategic areas where we thought, and we're going back a long way, we thought convergence would be a big thing, security would be a big thing, we thought the data center would be a big thing. We took our bets, we focused the company on only 5 areas. So we exited everything else in the turnaround plan, 5 areas in a services strategy. So we were 40% of our business was in services, only 40 at that stage, and now it's 55%. So we really swung the services in a focused growth area on the one end. The other key thing was geographic expansion. So we're going back.
But you were pulling back to some extent on the geographic expansion.
We had pulled back, not so much geographically. We didn't really pull back. We had pulled back out of businesses in geographies. So we were still.
I mean, Proxicom was the US acquisition,
the US.
North America.
Yeah. But we had made about, prior to my joining, about half a dozen other acquisitions in the US. Yeah.
So you still held your geographic
still held those
footprint,
ones,
but exited non-essential businesses.
Correct. So we were, before we started this phase of the profitable growth, in about 28 or 29 countries. And then what we did is we doubled that footprint. So we're now about 60. But in that...
now about 60 countries.
In 60 countries.
Well, let's just pause there for a moment, because again, how do you, as CEO, straddle an organization that has a presence in 60 countries?
You have very good people. You have very good people who,
So this is about delegation. I mean, how much time did you spend in the plane?
I think in an average year I was on the road about 40% of the time. Away, about 40% of the time. But it's the only way you can achieve this is by having fantastic people. It's not about I, but it's about we, team. We started one of the first things I did was start the people and culture strategy. Before that, I mentioned that I had not even HR at all. And I really believe that the fundamental basis of competition, right at the core of how we could win, how we could compete, was about people. So we really started that whole winning people's hearts and their minds, and really drove that very hard. Yeah.
Nippon Telegraph, NTT, an unlikely partner coming from Japan?
I think very unlikely.
How did that transpire?
Well, it was interesting. So we had over the years, now that it's old history, we can talk a little bit about it, but we had been approached by many global players prior to our delisting. And what was different about NTT was they were looking for a partner that could help them globalize. And really were looking for people who had these scars on their back, who had been
battle wounds and battle scars.
Won some, lost some, good, bad, and ugly. And that obviously we had been through that as dimension data, and showed that we could succeed and we were doing well. And so NTT had previously tried to expand in global markets and had not been successful.
But specifically into emerging markets?
Mainly into the US.
Into the US.
They spent a lot of money in the US. Really spent a lot of money in the US. They took a view that the vast majority of their business was still in Japan, despite spending billions of dollars on acquisitions outside of Japan. They hadn't worked. So they approached us because they thought that this time around what they wanted to do was acquire somebody who really had a great footprint, who had experience, who had people, who had the culture and all that stuff going for it, and then use that target, that partner, to actually be the expansion vehicle. So they wanted us to take the lead to expand globally.
Did you
meet them? Loved that.
Did you greet them with open arms in terms of the transaction,
not
or was
initially.
It was standoff in the initial phases?
Not standoff, but as a key, as a director. Remember, we were a listed company. You have a fiduciary duty to be receptive
and to take
any
offers to the market.
Any offer that comes, you have not only you have a fiduciary duty to, be open and receptive to accept them, to take in the offer, consider them seriously, and then decide how to play it. So initially we were also a little bit surprised, and the interesting thing about NTT is they would, when they approached us, they were the only another really significant thing for me. They were the only potential acquirer who called us and flew to us. Everybody else,
demanded you go to them.
All these global players, come to us, and we had to go and visit them, and just the little things. So they flew all the way. Today, their CEO and another board member flew all the way from Japan, meet us in Johannesburg. Obviously behind closed doors. We didn't even know what the meeting was about. We had suspicions, of course. And it was really a very, very brief meeting. It just couldn't have been 15 minutes. They flew all the way.
15 minutes? Yep. And we're talking about a major corporate strategy
so
here.
All they flew across to say was that they'd noticed us, they'd seen us succeeding, they'd seen the good work we were doing, and they wanted to start having strategic conversations. That's it. We saw a major change, a seismic shift in the technology market coming. And we thought that shift would require Dimension Data to transform into a very different company.
So go through almost a second phase of transforming,
Absolutely.
considering
this would be,
the journey that you had already taken.
For me personally, this was the fourth one in Dimension Data. So turnaround, profitable growth, transition, and then it was going to be this transition to entity and transform our entire business model. So what it would require was a significant amount of cash. We would have to change our model to IT as a service. We needed to go into the data set. I won't bore you with details, but there are a lot of strategic stuff we needed to do. And frankly, it would be a very good time for us to be out of the public glare in terms of those
and
numbers.
Just focus on the knitting.
And so, yeah, and also because we'd have to go through we thought a 3 to 5 year massive investment plan where the top line would look fantastic, and it has, driving that, but the bottom line because of a massive investment plan. So before investment, I think the numbers are solid, but there is a massive investment plan which would weigh on the
bottom line.
So it was actually, for say a 5-year period, reasonably good time to be out of the spotlight. Just from that perspective.
The cultural differences with a Japanese company.
Well, I've been amazed. Fantastic. I love the straightness. They're honest, true. Their word is their bond. They've delivered everything they said they would.
To what extent did they get involved in management?
0.
So they bought 100% of you,
yeah.
delisted you, and you still managed to run the company without any interference.
Correct. They were still on the board. Clearly, I have a weekly call with one of the board members, whose nickname is Mr. Forever, and so they're really supportive, and they have invested in Dimension Data post deal, probably more than the actual initial acquisition cost. So they bought us, and although our ambitions were off the charts. We want to grow 3 times the market. Not everybody volunteers that kind of growth rate, and we were achieving that. And then they wanted us to double that up again. So the only way we could do that for entity was another much bigger investment plan. So you would have seen us making acquisitions in the US, making acquisitions in Europe, and just reigniting another whole phase of growth.
So why your exit?
Well, Bronwyn, I think I've been doing it I've been in the hot seat for 12 years. And it's been a fantastic ride. I've been so lucky, to be asked to be running this company. I've been so lucky and blessed, and it's been fantastic.
Has your relationship with the executive chairman, Jeremy Ord, been an easy one?
No, yes, it has. I think Jeremy, when I was appointed, many years ago, 12 years ago, he gave me the authority and responsibility to run the show, and that's what I've done. And pretty much just been supportive and not being overmanaged or all over me. So I think it's been a 12-year period where we've gone along just fine.
60 countries, 31,000 employees. You've built a winning culture where you talk about getting employees to bring in both their hearts and their minds into their work. Talk to me a bit about your leadership style and what and who you've surrounded yourself with over that 12-year period.
So I think some core tenets for us, I think it's all about making sure in a peoples-based organisation, this is what it is. We don't own patents and anything that is defendable from that perspective. It's a peoples-based business.
So it's customer service.
It is client service. So the whole core of our strategy is we have to be better than anybody else at delivering the client expectation. So if delivering the client expectation is your strategy and your competitive advantage, so we're not the lowest cost producer. We don't have the coolest, biggest brand in the world. You don't have those things. It's about that client. At the end of the day, it's about the client service. So we try to differentiate on that. Only way you can do that is through people, and the only way you can get those people to be excited, they need to be more excited, motivated, passionate than anybody else. You have to build this cultural aspect. And so what I made sure that I would work extremely hard with my team. First of all, make sure you got the right people. First the right people. And then I've always said first who, and then what. So we make sure we try and get the right people, and then making sure we're doing the right things. And I spent, I reckon, most of my time with the top 1,000 people in Dimension Data. So when the company was smaller, it was started at maybe 400, but we typically had about 5% of Dimension Data. We created this leadership forum, and I would personally engage with every single person.
So globally?
Globally. Engage with every single person in that leadership forum every year. And every quarter, we would have, in the old days, just telephone calls, nowadays video calls. Make sure they understood the strategy. They understood our purpose, what we're trying to achieve. Make sure they understood how we were doing in a very frank, open way. So I'd get up, put up my scorecard. Here's my scorecard. This is how I'm doing. This is where, So we got them so involved in the strategy. They believed they owned it completely. They owned the strategy. It's theirs. It's not mine. It's never been Brett's strategy. They own the strategy, and then when it comes to execution, they drive it.
most people, Brett, walk away from a CEO position at retirement age. Now, you are very young. You've obviously got a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and there's still a lot for you, Brett Dawson, to do within, whether it's the South African business environment or it's the global business environment. So where to for you from here?
Bronwyn, you know, for 18 years I've only had one game plan. That's been dimension data, and I've loved it. I've been lucky and it's been so focused about it 24 hours a day. So I never had the privilege and the luxury to actually spend some time thinking about another journey. And that's what I'm doing right now.
So tell me, this is interesting because I want to know, when you wake up, you know, after really sweating hard for 18
blood,
years,
sweat and tears, yeah.
Blood, sweat and tears, you wake up now, what do you do? Do you take time to have some coffee before you sort of venture out of the house?
I mean, a little bit more time, but I'm still waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about, you know, stuff and what's next and exploring. But what's interesting is you have the time to actually think about and meet people. So before, I would be so focused on dimension data and the goals, what we needed to do. If somebody called up and said, let's have a cup of coffee, and I'm thinking about something, I never had the time. So I'm just as busy, but I'm meeting people that are approaching me with ideas, with thoughts, for advice. You know, and I just never had that time. So I'm pausing and looking at quite a few interesting things. So,
and I think there are many people right now who are very jealous, who would also like to pause and say this, you know, and have the opportunity or the privilege, as you say, to actually reassess and decide what should I do, and have the freedom to make those decisions as they come forward.
So while I'm thinking about sort of, you know, bigger plays, what I'm doing at the moment is also I've been asked to, you know, I was passionate in the last couple of years about what we've done. You know, we went very aggressively into the cycling environment.
So Tour de France.
Tour de France. So now, really exciting, delighted, not only about the solution we provide to the Tour de France. So every time you see a statistic on the screen, on the internet, it's coming from us. That's really cool. And that's just fantastic. And it raised our brand to a whole new level. And particularly in Europe and in the US, key markets, we still need to elevate our brand. That's what it was about. And then with our involvement in the team, also got to work with guys like Doug Ryder, who we really respected and think that's a cool opportunity to try and make a big difference. Using the technology, using some of what we know, make a difference. So, and through that also got involved with the Quebecer charity. And so I'm already working with both Doug and
So you're going to stay involved in,
I'm going to stay involved.
The cycling side? Because of course you are a cycling
just as a volunteer. You know, it's not like I don't want anything. It's more just I'm looking at how can we make some of the cycling more sustainable in terms of the income. And for the charity, you know, I've got some ideas, and we're working with Anthony to say, how do we take Quebecer, which I think is a fantastic idea. They're doing such good work. How do we take that and really, you know?
So Quebecer is a cycling charity.
Well, it's a charity, but it's a charity which tries, but uses the bicycle as the vehicle to empower people. And all over Africa, what they do is raise funds. Obviously, they have donors and the team. Now, the team is a critical purpose of the team is to ride for Quebecer. That's why you see the name is Dimension Data for Quebecer. And every time our guys win, and we've had 2 of those so far in this Tour de France, really cool.
So
they put up the 5, you know, the salute, which is really a symbol for the 5,000 bicycles we try to raise every year. And those go to people, typically children, underprivileged, who have to earn them, and then, you know, getting them the bicycle really empowers them. It takes their whole life to such a new level. So you know, that's essentially what they try and do. Also involved in education, but we think we can still take it to a new level.
Brett, are you going to make the transition from corporate, traditional CEO to entrepreneur? Do you think that this next phase of your life is going to be entrepreneurial?
I'm not sure. And I'm looking at a couple of probably half a dozen entrepreneurial things. But in this stage, you know, I'm determined to try. It's only been 2 weeks, so I'm determined to not make a decision too quickly. You know, I'm still going to be involved. I'm still available to Dimension Data. I'm still doing work, you know, with them. You know, we live on extremely good terms. Still, lots of things I'm doing there. And then I'm looking and I'm thinking. I'm just going to figure it out. Not ready to.
What a
give you
privilege!
the answer.
Time to figure it out. I think that's what we're all after. I've been chatting to Brett Dawson, former CEO of Dimension Data.